Mr. Chairman, we are live.
All right, thank you, Clarissa. Welcome, everyone. First order of business, we'll call a meeting to order and take the roll, please.
Representative Andrew, Representative Brown, Representative Connolly, Representative Harshman, Representative Nyman, Representative Newsom, Representative Obermuller, Representative Summers, Chairman Paxton.
Here. We are on Senate File 130, and I don't see Senator Driscoll here. He'll probably show up, but I think we were about to the point of taking public testimony, weren't we? Isn't that where we were?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Driscoll's not going to make it back. He's out of town today.
Oh, that's right. He is out of town. I forgot about that. Okay, so let's proceed with public testimony on Senate File 130. Anyone in the room would like to testify? Yes, come forward, please. Identify yourself. Tell us who you represent. Welcome, Mr. Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association. Mr. Chairman, in opposition to this bill, and really in opposition because I think it's a solution in search of a problem, we've surveyed Wyoming school districts and asked, since 2005, how many applications have you rejected? And we heard back from 39 of the 48 districts, and we found that only 3 applications had been rejected in that time, since 2005. Now, I know of one more, so I can tell you that there's been at least 4 that have been rejected since 2005. So there's really not a problem under the system that we have today. And the system that we have today actually works really, really well. Now, Mr. Chairman, I can tell you from personal experience, when I was a school board member, I had 3 hearings, 3 charter school applications that came before me. Statutes were a little bit different in the very first one. In that very first one, Mr. Chairman, we didn't have hearing officers. I actually acted as the hearing officer for that hearing, and I issued findings of fact and conclusions of law. And that application was taken to the state board on appeal, State Board of Education. So the process now is that if the application is denied by the school district, it goes to the State Board of Education as an appeal. And the state board looked at our findings of fact and conclusions of law, and they had to come to the same agreement. Not that we didn't like charter schools. Mr. Chairman, as a matter of fact, I don't believe that that's allowable under Wyoming law. Now, there's not a thou shall not in Wyoming law, but in Wyoming law, it sets out what a charter school has to do in order to be approved. And I believe that it's the duty of a school board member to neutrally evaluate it under the rubric. If they do the things that are on the list, then I think the school board has a duty to approve it. And if they don't approve it, then they have to write out by statute, they have to write out in their findings what it would take for the application to be approved. So as it stands today, you either have the choice of approving it because it was under the rubric what it should be, or if you deny it, you have to put into writing what would it take in order for the applicant to be successful. And so, like I said, I know that the one that's gone to the state board listed out what would it have to do to be successful. And the state board took a look at that record and they said, you know what? We agree that they did not meet the burden under the law, and you did provide them with a list of what it would take to be successful. Now, my batting average is not so great because I voted for 2 and against 1. And only one of those passed. So that's my personal voting average. And again, I don't think that it's necessarily the job of a school board to say, I don't like it. Now, a couple of things about the bill specifically. Number one, the example was laid out of, gosh, if we've got this school district in its small town, rural Wyoming, and it's going to be closed down. Wyoming statute specifically prohibits you from doing a charter school when something's going to be consolidated or closed down. That's not allowable. Now, if they do it before it gets closed down, then they can convert an existing school to a charter school. But if it's going to be shut down, then Wyoming law says that is not a permissible reason for a charter school. So, Mr. Chairman, I think there's a few other folks that will speak today, but I think it's really important that the committee understand the process of what it takes to approve a charter. And it starts with that great idea. And I think every educator has probably had a great idea for innovation in education. But there is a rubric, a set of rules of what would it take to take that great idea into the reality of a school. And they have to come up with everything on this list, on this rubric of what would it take. And there's things like curriculum and finance and all of these different elements that they have to fill out. Not only is there state statute, but there's chapter 32 of the Department of Education rules. And that's about 26, 27 pages where they set out in that how this whole process works. And so they start out and they fill out this application, and then they take it into the school district and they give it to the superintendent or the superintendent's designee. And they review it and they say, you know what, you're not good enough right here. You're going to have to work on this. And so there's a back and forth that happens right now with our districts and the applicant, back and forth. And I will tell you, at a minimum, it's dozens of hours, more than likely hundreds of hours that a district spends working with the applicant to help them to have an application that's ready to be reviewed. Then once that application is ready to be reviewed, they go through the hearing where they present that to the board. And again, the board has the decision of either saying, yep, you met the rubric, or no, you didn't, and here's the roadmap to be successful. Out of those 4 charters that were denied, not one of them took that roadmap and went back and reapplied and was successful later. Not one of them. They have the roadmap for success, but they didn't choose to do it. Now, I can tell you, I go and spend time with my peers around the country, and I hear this stuff about, oh, charter schools are bad and charter schools this and charter schools that. And I say, not where I come from. Where I come from, charter schools are actually a good thing, because being nested in the district is vested in their success. There's a close relationship between the district and the charter school. And there's lots of things that charter school is going to need to call on from the district. And if there's not a district there to support them, then it sinks or swims on its own. But having that district there and having that relationship is why we do have successful charters. Now, I think if we need to study this over the interim and say, is there something that we need to do to encourage innovation? I think that's a good idea, but I think it's really, really important to understand the actual process of application, to look at that rubric that the states put together, look at the Chapter 32 requirements of what does it take for them to be successful. Just a couple of other real quick thoughts about the bill itself. In the bill, it turns a couple of things on its head. Right now, a charter applicant, if they want a waiver from something, they have to apply for the waiver. This rule that the state has, we should waive it. But this bill would turn that on the head, and it says, these things about teachers and administrators, we're just going to automatically waive them. And so if they're no good, then we should take them out for all schools. If we shouldn't be adhering to those requirements, we should take them out, or we should at the very least keep it the way that it is now, so that we have the ability for a case-by-case evaluation. If it makes sense to waive requirements, then let's waive requirements. But if we're going to have requirements and we're going to presume that they are so worthless that no charter should have to meet them, then why do we have them for all of our other schools? That piece just doesn't make sense. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm really not opposed to charter schools at all. As a matter of fact, like I said, I've voted more often than I haven't in favor of charter schools. And I think that they can really fit a niche, and they can really be a great thing for Wyoming communities. But I just don't know that we do have a problem in Wyoming of denying charters or denying the idea that people want to do something different. And I think we have a really good system right now that encourages the applicant to work with the district in order for the charter to be successful. So, Mr. Chairman, I just ask you, please proceed with caution. If this is a topic of interest, I think it would be a great one for an interim topic of exploration. But I just don't think that jumping headlong into this bill to solve a problem that doesn't exist is a good direction for the state of Wyoming. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be open for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Farmer. Questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about, you mentioned that a charter school can't be created because a school is going to be closed. Can we ever consolidate or close a charter school, or once they are chartered, are they there forever and always?
So, Mr. Chairman, the prohibition on the charter really doesn't speak to the idea of whether a charter school can ever be closed. A charter is basically a contract. And so the contract is usually issued for a term of years, 5 years, 2 years. And so the authorizer gives the permission for that to exist. So I'm familiar with a charter school being chartered for 5 years and then subject to renewal. And so I would imagine that charter school could conceivably go away if it failed to meet its charter or if the applicant failed to renew its application. But the only reasons that you would not renew is if the applicant either didn't apply for renewal of that at the end of that term of years, or if they apply for renewal, but again, failed to somehow meet a rubric.
Okay, follow up.
Yeah.
Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Farmer, have you seen the amendments, the proposed amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I have not.
Okay, it's just good to know. Thank you.
Yes, Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Farmer, just the waiver piece, I think we're going to want to learn more about that and make sure it's in this proposed amendment. But, you know, as I look at this, I think I still got to believe it's going to be in our big towns where you have more customers. And we heard a little bit that, no, this is for small towns to save our small schools. And then you bring up this issue about not authorizing a charter to stave off the closing of a school, or, man, I guess, you know, your colleagues around the country as well. I mean, I just don't see it in small town Wyoming. I just don't think the money's in it with the number of customers. You're gonna have to have a couple hundred kids in one of these schools. It's not gonna be 30 kids as I look at it. But what's your thoughts on that part of it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, part of the application is a plan for financial viability. And I can again look back to my own experience and remember having some concerns of whether or not an applicant would meet the number necessary in order to have financial viability. Now, obviously, that's going to differ from district to district to school with the charter application, but it's not going to happen with a small number. As a matter of fact, I think it would be a little bit ironic if we were to somehow take a small Wyoming district and say we're going to split it in half. So let's just take a district that says 200 kids, and we're going to split it in half. Half of them are going to be in a charter and half of them are going to be in the regular public school. So now we would have the financial viability of the charter, and we would have to provide for financial viability of a small district. And I think that could potentially be the scenario where you're having two inefficient operations. Of course, the one under state law would exist as per state law. The one under charter, again, its application would say, how are you in your plan of viability going to do this? You get ADM and you get all of these things. But there's things that I think a lot of those good ideas just don't think about. Special education. Holy smokes, that's expensive stuff. They don't think about maybe nutrition services. How are we going to provide lunches? They don't think about transportation. Very few charter schools provide for transportation for students. But I think that most of the time they're thinking about, well, we've just got to have a teacher's salary and we've got to have administrator salaries. I think there's more to the business of running a school, and it does become problematic. Off the top of my head, I think that first application we were looking at, we were looking somewhere close to that 100 student mark as kind of what it would take to be viable.
Okay, other questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Nyman.
Just a thought, and as I listened to the testimony and everything, my mother taught in a country school. She's still at home. Actually, she's gathering eggs right now and taking care of stuff while I'm gone. But she taught 8 grades by herself in a one-room schoolhouse on a war bond when she was 16 years old. And her responsibility was a district superintendent. It was in Sundance, and he was a circuit rider. He just come around occasionally and check and make sure the teachers were doing it. I can't recall what a lot of those kids went on to be, but they were very, very talented, very smart, very well-educated people. And so I guess to me, as I listened to you, Mr. Farmer, explain some of the nuances of why this may not work, quite frankly, as you explained it, I almost start to think that's what could very possibly make this work. Because the difference that these charter schools would have to have is that latitude to be able to have fewer teachers, maybe responsible for more classes, which would allow them to be less expensive. And and not under the guys, because like you say, if I've got a school that's got this requirement that we have offer these things, then I have to bring those teachers to offer those things, and that increases our class costs and everything per student costs. And as we look at what we're going on in some of these smaller schools in Sheridan and stuff like that, potentially I would almost think there would be a cost savings by not having to have them fall under the same requirements that we do under the current model. But those young people could be just as well educated and still be able to keep that locality open. And as I listened to the testimony from Chairman Paxton the other day, when we see small communities that could potentially be a huge benefit to those communities by being able to offer something that's off model, I think we need to look at those different things as opportunities maybe to provide some life into some communities that don't have enough students to warrant, keeping a facility open like that. Could a teacher teach 2 or 3 grades? Now, my mom would say that you could teach 8 grades, and she had children all 8 of those grades. But saying that this is probably going to be a too difficult of a task, I don't think that is. I think that's something that's a challenge that needs to be met, and maybe can bring some nuanced thinking to some small communities that could desperately be served by this possibility. And I think that thinking outside the box and saying, hey, you know what, maybe we don't follow the model exactly. But as these kids are tested, are they getting it? Are the teachers getting the point across? Are these young people able to meet the demands that they have before them as they face society? I really do believe it could be done. And I think that's why I appreciate the opportunity to look at, maybe trying to salvage some of these locations and keep education diverse. I've often heard that from another representative, that we benefit. Small schools are beneficial or are blessed in the fact that they don't have huge numbers that they deal with. Kids do good in small schools, spread out a little bit. And that is also good for the communities. So almost some of your argument almost to me sounds like as if it's a positive that should be looked into and researched even deeper. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is that a wouldn't you agree kind of a thing? Mr. Farmer, do you have some response to
Mr.
that?
Chairman, I think there's some wonderful things in Representative Nyman's statement. And I will tell you, we do have small schools and multi-age classrooms across the state. Right here in Laramie County, our largest school district, we've got 2 schools that have multi-age classrooms that are little country schools, Willitson and Klotz. Those 2 schools have that kind of operation. Our most inefficient school in the state of Wyoming currently, I believe, has 2 students, but oftentimes has 1, and that's Notch Peak in Albany County. So yeah, we certainly have, under our existing system, reached out to meet the needs of our small communities where they exist. As to should we have waivers of requirements, Number one thing to know is since the change in No Child Left Behind, the highly qualified piece of teachers is different today than it was under No Child Left Behind. And so our Professional Teaching Standards Board has been working to identify what can we do to still put a quality teacher in front of Wyoming students today and look for that flexibility. What can we do where we could take somebody who has welding experience and get that welder into a classroom and teach them how to teach kids to weld? Maybe they weren't trained as a teacher, but we can put them there. And so we are, under our present system, looking at ways that we can find ways to meet the needs of students, and not by saying that we necessarily are going to give them less. We're still desiring to make sure that that kid in Laramie has the same education as that kid in Sundance, the same opportunities, and that when we have our small schools, what are the ways to get around that? What can we do that we've learned from the pandemic to expand on classroom-based virtual education, to expand on digital learning, to expand on remote learning? I think there's a lot of things that we could be doing in those areas. How can we share classrooms across the state so that a kid in Notch Peak, if this is taking liberty because Notch Peak, I think maybe only goes up to 7th or 6th or 8th grade, but if they somehow decided we're going to continue high school out there, what if they wanted a physics class? Could they take that from Laramie High School virtually? There absolutely are ways in our current system that we can do that without having to go to a charter, and without having to say that we're going to just approve of some system that relaxes all of the rules. We can do that under the system that we have now, by working with things like the Professional Teaching Standards Board to find those good people like your mother that we put in the classroom and that grows and benefits students, so that they can learn regardless of where that teacher's background may be. What are the abilities of the person that we put in front of the kids to make sure that those kids have those learning opportunities? And so I don't disagree that charter schools can have their place. I don't disagree that they have these times that they fit a niche, but I will tell you that it's not necessarily going to be a cheaper endeavor. As a matter of fact, I'm a little befuddled by the bill saying that we're only going to give 85%. We're going to give less than 100% to an application that goes through this alternate process. That seems odd. Cost is going to be cost-based. And I think Wyoming's got that kind of requirement regardless of the type of schooling. It's got to be a cost-based approach. And the last thing I'd comment that you had a great comment on, education researcher by the name of John Hattie. He's one of these people that education policy folks like to talk about. He said the number one thing that has an impact on student learning is small school. Not just small class, but small schools. Small schools can facilitate learning better than any other educational intervention that there is.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Farmer? All right, thank you, Mr. Farmer. Anyone else like to testify on Senate File 130? Yes, please come forward, identify yourself, tell us who you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Marguerite Herman, and I'm here as a trustee at Laramie County School District Number 1. And we have 2 charter schools in our district. One is an elementary, one's a secondary. And I was involved in renewing the charter for the elementary and in approving and renewing the charter for it's PASS. It's an acronym for the secondary school. So I have some experience with this, what it takes. And just to sort of echo what Mr. Farmer said in responding to Representative Nyman is that a lot of what he says is true, but is definitely possible under the current system as it is right now. And sort of the latitude given to our elementary school, they had a kindergarten with 35 children in it because it fit their model. They spend every Friday on testing. That's all they do is test on Fridays. They wear uniforms. They have extended day, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So and they do their own curriculum on their own. And so there's quite a bit of latitude they have free reign to do. So, and also to counter the idea that there are districts that are anti-charter. What I want to weigh in on today right now is the aspect of the bill that divorces a charter application and ongoing success from a school district and turning it over to the Department of Education to do all that front end work and support work going on. And I'll just briefly, I had my instruction department type up all the things that have district resources that are not costed out anywhere, that we invest in the initial application and ongoing success, ongoing support, and then all the contracted services that make our two charter schools successful. And I will just sort of say at this point, we want them to succeed. They offer something very different to our students. And sometimes it doesn't work out. The students go back and forth. The two schools together are a little bit under 300 students. And so there's some movement between the two. We definitely want them to succeed. And so we're the support not only of our resources, but we're there with oversight to make sure things are going correctly, and we catch things and help them when things go wrong. So it's a long list, and so I'm not going to go through it all, but just to summarize. So from submission of the plan, so we provide the rubric, interpret the statute. We use our district personnel to confirm adequate submission of both the plan and link the appendices. We meet with the charter school, supply resources. Our department meets again to confirm the plan is ready to be scored. Leadership convenes to score the plan, development of contract with legal counsel. And we have a board hearing, the board approves, denies, and so he says estimated man hours required by our district for a typical application renewal process greater than 100 hours. This does not include attorney hours for the development, review, and finalization of the charter contract. The 100 hours is reflective of a typical application renewal. However, during the initial charter school application, the approximate times listed above are significantly increased due to the multiple meetings needed to clarify questions, et cetera. And I just questioned the Department of Education. Their plates are very full. And do they have the time and the travel, because you're talking about remote, 300 miles or whatever, to be on site to really help and support the charter application? I question, I know they're willing to try it, but I just, having a district right there on site, I think is key to getting the application approved, the initial success. Ongoing support, review of federal program submissions, review course creation, physical processes, data collection, facilities funding through the state construction department, nutrition services coordination, transportation coordination, contract agreement and coordination for special education, ESL collaboration, homeless student and family support, coordination of neglect and delinquent student services. And ongoing support of charter schools by the district include, not limited to, resolving parental or community concerns, clarifying state and federal requirements, resolving human resource issues, facility and ground support, crisis and crisis management support, et cetera. And then there are a lot of, because we are close together and we're so interwoven and we cooperate so much, our services are available to the charter. So they can come and use our facilities, and because we've got 14,000 students and we have a lot of services that are a support to them. So their charter school succeeds because we have contracted services, current or potential memoranda of understanding, Department of Special Ed, Department of Transportation, Department of Nutrition Services, Department of Technology, Department of Human Resources, Department of Instruction for ESL services. And this is, and once again, we really want the schools to succeed and to have all these services right there. And as Representative Harshman said, the ideal, so we have 14,000 students and about a little less than 300 in the charter school. And that's fine. We are able to support them on and have oversight. The PODER and PASS, now they're completely K through 12. This will be their first graduating class, and we're there for them. And we provide oversight, which I don't think you can do from a remote location. Once again, I guess the districts, I think, have a good track record of doing a really good job of reviewing applications, helping them to succeed, helping them succeed ongoing and then providing our facilities and our programs to them. And I don't see a little tiny school in an isolated rural community just having the resources to take care of our kids the way we want them to take care of and to meet standards. So with that, I would just, I've been through a couple of renewal hearings and we ask hard questions. And I think the Vodere and past people have done a great job of responding. And if there's been a deficit, they take care of it. They don't have a music program. And so they come to the district for their music and for their arts and that sort of thing. So it's a great cooperative, supportive relationship that I think if you take the district out of it, you miss a whole chunk of that. Thank you. So questions?
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? All right, thank you. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jed Ciccarelli, Finance Director for Laramie County School District 1. I won't belabor some of the points that Ms. Herman provided earlier with regards to the ongoing administration and oversight of charter schools, but I will add a few observations that may seem trivial in nature, but can have some important consequences on the ongoing way that we would manage or provide oversight of the charter school operations. Specifically, from what I can understand of the proposed bill, the state land investment, the SLIB would be responsible for the authorizing aspects of the charter. However, from what I could tell, the school district would still be responsible for acting as the pass-through, if you will, for fiscal services, whether that's federal grants or school foundation dollars. That responsibility would still be a part of the school district. The reason I bring that up is because part of the generally accepted accounting principles, our charter schools within our district are required to be presented as discrete units within our financials. That might seem like a minor detail, but it can have some large implications on the school district's operations. Specifically, we have had instances where the charter schools have had significant enough audit findings that have made the district a high-risk auditee. Also, it would be unclear if in this particular arrangement, if those charters would be within the state's finances or within the school districts, because the criteria for that is the charter school financially dependent on the school district, or are they financially dependent on the SLIB? Furthermore, there's a layer that is used to determine how those units are presented by just the oversight that's provided by the authorizing entity. So those are a couple of issues that might be troublesome as the district determines how they would provide some oversight. A couple of other minor aspects, certainly the school facilities. The bill directs the SLIB to be able to instruct school districts to provide space for charter schools if there's unused or underused school facilities. It's unclear where the school district would have some input on determining if there is underutilized square footage. To give an example, our school district, we have the Old Cary Junior High that's still within the school district's inventory. Well, that's based on a long-term facility plan that we've approved through the state construction department to allow us flexibility to remodel other schools and move through some of the more invasive facility changes that we need to make and use that as flex space. So in that instance, would the charter school have access to some of that square footage? And would it mean that it would impact the district's long-term financial plans and facility plans with regards to that space? Probably the best example is the impact of COVID-19. The district's capacity is based off of a snapshot, the October enrollments. This past October, no surprise, a lot of students opted to take distance or virtual education. So when you look at our capacity, we had nearly 2,000 kids that were enrolled in virtual education. So for the calculation metrics, it looks like we're well below capacity. Well, we've seen a lot of those students return back to the brick and mortar classroom. So I would ask that in some way, shape, or form, the school district would have some input on determining if there is underutilized or unused square footage before that directive is given to a school district to provide charter school space. Mr. Chairman, just a couple of other random thoughts here. It also takes away the ability of the school district to have any input on the charter management companies. Our school districts do contract with a charter school management company out of Florida. It can prove pretty onerous to provide not only the information that they need for proper fiscal data reporting, but also to ensure that they're following Wyoming procedures for accounts payable, cancellation of warrants, all the other pieces that come into our statutory requirements for oversight. And then, Mr. Chairman, the last thing, or just another observation is we have had some flexibility over how long we grant the charter renewal. Right now, we can grant a charter not to exceed 5 years before renewal. Our district and our board has opted to have shorter renewal terms to address things like audit findings, other areas that they need to review on a more timely basis. Graduation is a key aspect of that. When our charter school started to serve senior high students and we wanted to review compliance with the Hathaway curriculum and graduation requirements, we did have a shortened renewal period so that we had an opportunity to bring the charter school back and go through the charter hearing. And Mr. Chairman, just a few thoughts. Again, happy to address any questions.
Okay, questions, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jed, I'm going to take you back to your days at the Department of Ed really quick. And I'm just kind of curious because I worked in a small portion of government accounting, and not only did we have GAP, but we also had GASB. And so my question, when you talked about the GAP findings being an issue and having that relay back down to the school district, I'm a little bit naive in this. If there was issues there, could there be issues with GASB stuff? And if there was a charter that did not come underneath the school district, but then was assigned to the school, or I'm sorry, the Department of Education, would that present a problem with state government with, particular types of GASB findings as well as GAP findings? And can you expound upon that a little more?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, yes, I think that is one of the main concerns. What's unclear is really how GASB 34 specifically would address this discretely presented component unit, because there seems to be kind of a three-way charter between the district, the SLIB, and the charter school entity. So there could be ramifications, whether it's on the state's financials or the district financials. And if it was to be incorporated within the school district's financials, the limiting aspects that we have for any oversight and, for the lack of a better term, leverage over the charter school is significantly diminished with the way it's structured here.
Other questions? Okay, thank you. Clarissa, do we have anyone else virtually, and perhaps State Department of Education?
Mr. Chairman, we do. We have Ms. Akins from the Department of Education, and then we also have 3 folks who have currently raised their hand to testify. There might be others as well, though.
Okay, thank you. Kari, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Kari Akins, Chief Policy Officer at the Wyoming Department of Education. Want to start off by expressing the state superintendent's support of this bill. She has grappled with our charter school authorization laws for some time and believes that this does present a viable and objective path that exists in other states as well. So basically having the dual pathways for charter authorizations would provide more options for charter applicants. And she does see that having SLIB as an arbiter of the state authorization pathway is something that could work, perhaps somewhat similarly to how the SLIB follows the process with SLIB for investments works with the state treasurer's office. In this case, of course, it would be the department making recommendations about those charter school authorizations. Now kind of putting back on my chief policy officer hat from the department's perspective, this would all run through the accountability division at the WDE were this bill to pass. So any administrative duties would land there, mainly with our accreditation team. We do believe that because of the existing overlap in kind of the duties where our accreditation team regularly reviews certain aspects of school district operations and programming for accreditation purposes, that they could absorb these duties as well. So also just one area that I know is still to be discussed with this committee. I know there were discussions about on page 12, the top of that page on the engrossed version of the bill, where it talks about the exemptions for the charter schools. And it does mention exemptions from rules of the state board. And there was some discussion by this committee on Friday about how we have the State Board of Education. We do also have the Professional Teaching Standards Board. And I know that this committee will have further discussion about how broad or not they want the exemptions to go. But we would ask for clarification in the final language of the bill if that is specifically referring to the State Board of Education, or if it is also or instead referring to the Professional Teaching Standards Board, since we do have multiple state level boards regarding education. So that is one just technical kind of clarification that we would ask for as this committee continues to work this bill, Mr. Chairman. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions that the committee may have.
Okay, questions from the committee? Okay, Clarissa, do you have someone else virtually that would like to testify?
Mr. Chairman, I do. I have Tate Mullen up first, and then we'll have Jeff Verosky and then Russ Simnick.
Okay, Tate, introduce yourself. Tell us who you represent.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen and I represent the Wyoming Education Association. I'll make my comments brief. I'm going to echo some of the sentiments that were laid out today. Again, I don't see the problem that this is attempting to remedy. It's not that charter schools aren't making applications. We believe that the process that is in place currently is adequate and fits the needs. The other piece of this, last week, Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers noted that there was an issue with local control, and we would like to echo that sentiment. Again, those individuals and the process that is in place that are best suited to make the decision. I mean, we know how diverse our communities are, and the people and the organizations, I guess, that are best suited to make those decisions are within those local communities. So, you know, we appreciate the work that the SLID board does, but this is well beyond their purview, and we feel that that decision-making authority best lies within the district. And I'd also like to echo some of the comments made by Representative Harshman. Again, you know, the reason that you don't see a ton of charter schools knocking down the doors in these smaller communities is because they have done, you know, either a needs-based assessment or a cost-based assessment. And looking at these smaller communities, there just isn't a viable population for those charter schools to go in and set up shop, which is why you see it in our larger communities. And finally, and I'm going to sound like a broken record on this, you know, and I appreciate the bringer of the bills looking at how to find some ways to alleviate our education funding issue that we have in the state and what it means for small rural communities and small rural schools. But we have the answers available to us. We have tried and true answers to save our rural communities and our rural schools, and that's to continue to fund education through the processes that you guys have implemented within some of the previous bills, whether that's revenue diversification or diversion, or the increase in revenue through taxes that are dedicated strictly for education. And with that, I'll stand for any questioning.
Hey, thank you. Questions from the committee? Okay, Clarissa, I think we're ready for someone else.
Mr. Chairman, we have Jeff Verosky up next.
Okay, go ahead. Introduce yourself. Tell us who you represent, please.
All right, Chairman Paxton, members of the education community, good afternoon. My name is Jeff Verosky, and I'm currently the principal and director of the Laramie Montessori Charter School here in Laramie. And I wanted to speak to the committee today on behalf of my school and our school board for our charter school to show our support for this bill. Our school here has been in existence for about 10 years, since 2011. During that time, and from what I've experienced during my time here at the school, we've had a very good working relationship with our local school district, which is Albany County School District number 1. Even as a charter school principal, the district administration does an excellent job of including myself and our school in meetings and being a voice in decisions and discussions that affect who we're here for, which are our students. So as a school, Laramie Montessori is currently in the process of renewing our charter for another 5 years and working with our district superintendent, the district administrators, and the school board from Albany County. This process has been very smooth and productive, and I attribute this just to the excellent working condition we have with the local district. The major difference between us and our home district is just the manner in which we teach our students and give them the information that they need to learn. So through the grapevine, I've heard, opposition to this bill, that it will dismantle the public school system as we have it. I don't think this bill will dismantle the excellent public school system that drew me to come to Wyoming many years ago. I feel this bill cleans up the current statutes that we have for charter schools to follow, and it'll make it more obvious and clear the path that the charter schools need to take to educate our Wyoming youth. So as a public school administrator, I'd just like to encourage you to support this bill. And I think it can be a huge benefit to those Wyoming youth that need to learn in an alternative way than the traditional school classroom. So Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time to allow me to speak, and I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hello, Mr. Vorosky. I'm sorry that we haven't met, even though we're in the same community. But I am curious, given your testimony was really about how well Montessori is working with the Albany County Board of Trustees, School District Board of Trustees. And so, but your testimony was in favor of the bill. And the bill actually switches on its head that relationship that you're talking about. And in fact, would have had Montessori have another and different authorizer. Because honestly, Montessori was the school that I was talking about that honestly kind of came to heads with the school board at that time and ultimately was successful. And the result has been a good working relationship with all of the parties. To me, it indicated that our statutes work, and they work even when a board, and in that case of parents to start with, and the school board disagreed. The parents ultimately prevailed because our statutes worked. So I'm curious, why would you support this bill, which again turns that relationship on its head and would have you now reporting perhaps to the SLIB board instead of to the Albany County School District and the Board of Trustees for the school district?
Go ahead.
I would hope that, Mr. Chairman, if I may proceed. So, based on your question, I know it was mentioned on Friday, this bill actually has a lot of different parts to it that deal with a lot of different aspects of charter schools and how they run and also how they can be authorized. In my time here, the relationship has been good, but I can see, there could be times where it could be a little bit tough, especially if the school boards would not be in favor of having a charter school in there. I just feel like overall, this bill gives the charter schools a little bit better direction on where we need to go, and it also gives that other option if there are other charter schools that want to start that may not have the support of the majority of their local board.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yes, Representative Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vorosky, could you talk a little bit about how your school deals with special education funding and whether that is still 100% reimbursed under your charter school model? Thank you.
Yes, Chairman Paxton, yes, special education is 100% reimbursed. We actually do our special education services through the Special Services Department at Albany County School District. And we work with that department. They provide us with teachers and para-educators that we need to service the children that we have at our school on IEPs. And then based on each year, those services may change and our staffing may change. But we are part of the district in a way with that funding, and it is 100% reimbursed, just like any other school in the state. For us, it goes through the school district.
Other questions from the committee? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Clarissa, do we have anyone else virtually who would like to testify?
Mr. Chairman, we do. We have Russ Simnick next, and then I believe that will conclude our virtual testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity today to speak in support of Senate File 130. My name is Russ Simnick. I represent the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools. I'm a former charter school founder, teacher, school leader, but most important, proud parent of 2 charter school daughters. Today in America, 3.3 million students are taught by 220,000 public school teachers in one of the 7,500 public charter schools in 45 states plus Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and Guam. My organization, the National Alliance, is a nonprofit that performs research and advocacy for the charter school sector. In the past few years, we've helped pass strong enabling laws in such states as Washington, Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, Maine, and West Virginia. We've also worked with states that have weak laws, such as Iowa, Nevada, Ohio, and others to improve their laws. All over America, charter schools are providing opportunities for families and kids that they otherwise wouldn't have had. We've had STEM schools, art schools, tribal schools, college prep schools, dropout recovery, vocational schools, agricultural schools, language immersion schools, and classical liberal arts schools are just a few ways that charters are serving kids. Our organization drafted models of charter school law, and we rank each state's charter school law against each other. Of the 45 states with charter school laws, Wyoming currently ranks 42nd. Only Kansas, Alaska, and Maryland rank lower. We believe that Wyoming's law is in need of improvement in several ways. First, there need to be multiple authorizers, so a school district cannot be the final say if a charter is to open. Second, the requirements of the charter application and contract seriously needs to be beefed up, so we have some assurance that only good charter schools will open. Third, once they are open, they need greater autonomy to innovate. And finally, they should be held to strict levels of performance-based accountability. Wyoming's law is missing most of these elements, and that's why we believe that the state only has a handful of charters serving just a few hundred students. And it's also why many of those innovative models have not sought to code to the state. I've heard often the argument is, well, we haven't had that many applicants, but I would say if your law was strengthened, you would have many more applicants. Because when charter school operators look to come to a state, or even open up from within a state, they look to the strength of the law before they begin their investigation. I can tell you from personal experience in my home state of Indiana, we were ranked towards the bottom of the list several years ago. We worked with our law to get it into the top 10 under the leadership of Governor Mitch Daniels. When our law was weak, we were begging to get good charter school networks to come to the state, and nobody would. But after we improved their law, we had them lined up. Now our state has 104 high-quality charter schools throughout the state. The fact that Wyoming has a weak charter school law is the bad news. However, the good news is that by waiting to improve your law, you can benefit from 30 years of collective learning from throughout the nation. I reviewed this bill, and as it stands now, without any amendments that I haven't seen, it would be one of the top 10 strongest charter laws in the country. It's a long bill. I've heard that too, but it does a lot. It really does provide, the opportunities to open up really high quality schools, provides the opportunities to innovate and strict accountability to deliver results. You guys would be hard pressed to deliver a better bill to your kids and families in the state. I thank you for your consideration and urge you to keep this bill moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the committee? All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience here that hasn't testified on this bill that would like to testify?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go
I
ahead.
apologize. Cassie Craven just raised her hand, so we do have one more person virtually.
Okay, that'd be fine. Bring them on, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Perfect. My name is Cassie Craven. I'm here representing the Wyoming Liberty Group. I've had the opportunity to review this bill and listen to some of the testimony, and I wanted to clarify a couple points which I think may be helpful for the committee. The first point is one of nuance, but it's very important. We have to remember how a charter school comes to form an application to begin with. Part of that process is they have to demonstrate a unique population that they wish to serve in a different way. And they're making that application currently under existing law to a school district. So essentially what they're saying is, we have a population that we want to serve better than you're able to do. And that's an interesting, unique proposition. I know where I live, Poder Academy really serves underprivileged, lower socioeconomic status families, children that typically have behavioral issues even. And even with that very challenging population, they have thrived and been among the highest in our state proficiency-wise. So I think that that's a main point of contention that we've already heard testimony today bears out different results in different counties. And I think that by choosing a different policy path, which this bill presents itself to, you have the Department of Education, who's a more neutral body, for one, and then you also have the SLIB board, which is a representative pool of people who are very well positioned to make these sorts of tough decisions and follow up required, but I believe in a more neutral capacity that doesn't pin the two interests against each other. And then I believe it appropriately loops in the local control elements, which are critical, definitely critical. But I think that those are more critical later on in the process. It removes them from that unfortunate and uncomfortable authorizer position. So I believe that if we look at it through that lens, it makes a little bit more sense. And it is a flip in policy. It's a policy decision that this body would have to weigh. Is the Department of Education more appropriate, or is that local school board more appropriate? I think that it becomes clear we have one of the oldest charter laws in the country. We were established in 1995, and however, that brings about concerns that it's a little outdated. It needs a little work. The bill, and I'll be cognizant of your time, so I won't walk through the whole thing, but it makes several critical pieces that when you really compare us to the rest of the nation, it gets us to a place where we're competitive to bring in some of these very good charter schools that we see from our southern neighbors, for example, who have technical and vocational agricultural high schools, and I think that we need to make note of the fact that we have one of the highest youth suicide rates in the country. And I think that it matters when a kid can go to school and really be thinking about their future. They're not in the back of a classroom where they feel like they don't fit in, like they don't matter, like their interests are irrelevant. When you bring in these kinds of charter schools, I think that we just expand the opportunities for the future of our kids and for their value. And I don't think that that's a point that we should just drive by. And I don't think that it's our place to say, well, in the small towns, they won't come, but in the big towns, they do. I don't know what that'll look like. But what I do know right now, from comparing us to other states, the sheer amount of time under our existing law, you already heard testimony that they have the choice to only reauthorize every 5 years. Yet in most circumstances, from the individuals I've spoken with, those reauthorizations happen quicker. The school district, despite the 100+ hours and expensive attorney time, for some reason, still comes back earlier than what is even required to have these expensive and, in my opinion, bureaucratic and honestly wasteful discussions a lot of times. I think that we could circumvent a lot of the red tape and provide an opportunity for some of these schools to come in. Because what sense does it make for an entity to come into our state when there's no amount of certainty in what they're going to do? And the amount of time that they're going to have to accomplish that, it's not reasonable. That's why you're not seeing these schools like our neighbor to the south even go through the headache. And the other thing, it's very expensive because school districts have plenty of lawyers and they have plenty of tax dollars to spend just for that purpose. But a charter school, a group of parents who wants to get up and going, don't have that kind of backing and funding. They can't afford that kind of headache. And so what this does, I think, is it really brings everybody to the table. And as an attorney, I can tell you in a good settlement, not everybody's thrilled with that, right? It's a settlement. But I do think that we bring in elements of local control, of state oversight, of the ability to enhance our economy. And at the end of the day, honorable members of the committee, I think to help our kids, I think it's worth taking a chance to see what we can do in this state when, to be quite honest, we're one of the only states in this whole country that hasn't seen an education choice bill even hit the floor. I think that parents are ready for more options in this state. And I want to touch very briefly on the fiscal cost savings because that's a very important piece. a University of Arkansas study, which is frequently looked at, I think, on both sides of the aisle, it's pretty impartial to my knowledge, showed the significant financial benefit of charters when in conjunction with the public system. The reason is they outperform almost every time in cost effectiveness. There's been a 43% productivity advantage found in all charter schools across this nation compared to traditional public. And you can see that in our own state. I visited several of them personally just to see. I didn't grow up having charter schools. I grew up in rural Nebraska. We didn't have this kind of thing. And what I found is it's a lot like I grew up in a small town in Nebraska where you have one principal and one superintendent and one secretary. And some of these schools are quite large, and yet they're running very efficiently, in my opinion, for pennies on the dollar, which is why the 85% in this bill, I think, makes a lot of fiscal sense for our state and will have some advantages in terms of capping our growth and our capital costs for building these schools. I think it'll have a big play there. I also think, just to close out here, there's in that same study, they said they demonstrated a 46% public charter school advantage in ROI. There's all sorts of studies about how graduation rates are higher, college rates are higher. The data speaks for itself, so I won't testify at length on that, but I would, I would encourage you to get this out on the floor and have some good debate about this data and have, constituent conversations to really see what's going on in your district and how this might actually be helpful for everybody. So I thank you for your time, and I'd sit for any questions.
Hey, thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the committee? All right, thank you. I guess we have one more person to testify, and we have another bill to work. So let's be brief if we can, please. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I understand brevity is always appreciated with your group, so I'll try to be fairly brief. Again, I think our state statutes and rules give us a lot of opportunity to do some things there. Again, I don't see in the bill where it changes anything with the rubric that they would have to pass. So I think currently as a school district, we've got 2 charter schools in our district. They have been able to work through the process with us collaboratively to bring those forward. A couple things that I'm really concerned about. One, I believe in the bill, it talks about the ability to have a virtual charter school. We can't even have a virtual charter school in our own districts. We have to have virtual programs, and they have to be part of every one of our schools or attached to some of our schools out there. So I would say if they're going to be able to have a virtual charter schools, that I would hope that districts have that opportunity again. Another thing that's a little bit interesting for our charter schools is they're not required to meet public meeting laws. It's waived for our charter schools. So I think that's another area that might be looked into. I really am not against charter schools. I'm not against this bill, but I would urge us to go ahead and use this as an opportunity to put together an interim study where we can get everybody at the table to talk about some of the positives and negatives. Again, we've got 2 charter schools. They do a great job. When I was the superintendent in Campbell County, we had a couple of charter schools that worked forward to talk about working with us. One, the leader actually moved and they didn't have somebody else step forward. But it's a pretty onerous process. But on the other side of that, I think we have good charter schools in our districts because of that. Again, I think that we're required to work with our charter school people until they can get a charter approved with us. And if they disagree at the end of that, there's still an appeals process with the state board. And with that, I'll be quiet and take any questions.
We do appreciate your brevity. Any questions for Dr. Brown? Okay, thank you very much.
Chairman,
Yes.
I apologize. Mr. Hamilton just raised his hand as well.
Okay, very briefly, please.
Okay, I'll keep it brief. I'm Mr. Hamilton, principal of Horizon High School in Evanston, Wyoming. I represent the Wyoming Association of Secondary School Principals. And our position on this bill is we're not for it. Pretty skeptical about anything that loosens up charter schools and the creation of. And I'm going to share with you my personal experience. I was a charter school principal for almost a decade in Wyoming. I ran Fort Washakie Charter High School back, I think, 2004 and beyond. And it was created because that district didn't have a high school at the time, and it was a means to secure a high school. When it was created, it was awesome. The school boards were getting along, and they authorized a separate board to function in their school district. That board had members of WD, had the state superintendent on it for a spell. But over the course of time, the boards didn't get along. They became kind of contentious in directions that they wanted to go. And we ended up, before it was over, with 2 separate school boards that did not get along and 2 separate superintendents. And what I saw down the road with Arapahoe Charter High School too at the time, both school boards hired directors versus principals or superintendents. They weren't certified the same way. A lot of them didn't have any education in any experience in education. What I saw in Fort Washakie as we neared the end of our charter was K-12 Inc., a virtual company, a for-profit company, which also operates right now in Wyoming. They came into the district and they offered to pay the district $500,000 10 years ago. I'll probably pay more than that now, but they said, hey, we have the resources to run this school. You just take the $500,000, stay out of our hair, let us run a board, and we'll operate the virtual school out of your district. And it was really attractive for that district at the time. It was something they almost authorized. They didn't, in part probably because they had a principal that understood what was going on. But I would caution you, and I would say that those companies are still out there. They're still for-profit international companies with the resources to come in. One of the things we struggle, and I've always been a small school principal for 18 years in Wyoming. One of the things we struggled with as a charter school at the time is we did not have the business office and all of the resources that comes with the district to keep our T's and I's dotted and crossed all the time, especially when the relationship went south. And so we got into trouble with due dates and WDE and efficiencies that way. But I think, I'll just wrap things up by saying, we look pretty seriously. I saw you guys look pretty seriously and consider bills around consolidation. Well, this is really the opposite end of that spectrum. If we're really looking at ways to become more efficient, creating more schools is probably not going to help with that. So with that, I'm open to any questions.
Okay, questions from the committee? All right, thank you. We're going to wrap up public testimony and committee. What's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Brown, seconded by Summers. Discussion on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, I have 2 amendments. So I think, Mr. Chairman, I would move, and you'll notice it's named 2001, I guess, 130H 2001. So I would move that, and if I get a second, then I'll.
Seconded by Brown.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so really, I'm going to give you a broad idea what this does. It leaves the fact that a school is still an authorizer, but the other authorizer instead of SLIB becomes the superintendent of public instruction. But a charter school can only be formed upon a vote of the people. And so there's 2 ways for that to occur. One is through a petition of the people. And the second is by an application to the superintendent, and she puts it on the ballot to a vote of the people. And the size of that district can be as small as a voting district or as large as a school district. And so basically, Mr. Chairman, as you roll through the bill, for the most part, what it does is just replace SLIB with superintendent of public instruction, and it puts in place that process. And really that process, if you look at the amendment, go to your amendment online, on line 25 of page 1. And this is the bulk of it. A is prior to formation of a charter that is not authorized by a school district. The charter school shall only be authorized by the state superintendent. Following approval of the charter school at an election as provided in this section, And then it goes down through all that. And then there's another section where a vote of the people can also take away the charter. And rather than go page by page, I'll try to hit the few other changes in the bill I have that aren't just conforming to that idea. Now I'm going past page 10, past page 12. Okay, one change that's different than just conforming is on page 14. And that is at the top of page 14, the new language, it strikes the new language, which is if the state loan and investment board is the authorizer, the state board may instruct any the board may instruct any appropriate school district to lease unused or underused school facilities. So I take that authority away. Bottom of page 14, I knock out franchises. Those are the big end of the changes, and the rest is mostly conforming language as it relates to the superintendent of public instruction and the election. And I'm just making one last check through this. Yeah, that's that page 29 at the top. It's not needed anymore because WDE is the entity that would be looking at, so you don't need a report from them. And then the one other change that I have is at the bottom of page 30, where you have all the strikeout starting on line 19. You would make a capital P and reinsert that language, which basically potential effects of the school, including but not limited to the facilities to be utilized. It just goes through and makes it a requirement to evaluate the effects on the district of a school being put in place and a charter school being put in place. And really the rest of it's just conforming. The only other one would be the one big change that would be that on page 34, lines 6 through 14, where it says any charter school may offer a private pension or retirement program, I delete both of those sections. And so that is that amendment in a nutshell. And to save time, I would stand for questions.
Okay, questions on the amendment? Questions been called for. All in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion is carried. I believe you had one more. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mr. Chairman, I have 2002. And Mr. Chairman, I would move 2002 amendment to 130, Senate File 130. If I get a second, I'll explain it.
Okay, seconded by Brown.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, what this does is it goes in really on the last pages of the bill, page 36, and it creates a new subsection 4, and I'm going to read this in detail. So section 4 would say, notwithstanding this act, basically, as created and amended by sections 1 and 2 of this act, no more than 3 charter schools shall be authorized by an entity that's not the school district board until the state superintendent of public instruction reviews the impacts and benefits of charter school and provides a report to the Joint Education Interim Committee recommending that additional charter schools should be authorized under the process implemented in this act. In other words, it's a 3-school limit study, come back to the legislature. Section 5, the Joint Education Interim Committee shall study charter schools and shall prepare any legislation it deems necessary related to charter schools for consideration during the 2022 budget session. And then, Mr. Chairman, finally, section 6 goes into the effective date and makes a subsection A, except as provided in subsection B. It's effective immediately. Subsection B pushes the effective date out to July 1st, 2022. So basically, we push it out, we study it in the interim. It's a limit on 3 schools, and then you'd have another study. And that's basically the amendment.
Okay, discussion on the Second Amendment. Sensing you're ready to vote, question is called for. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay, the amendment is carried. Back on the bill. Yes, Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I give my amendment, I'd just like to preface it with saying I'm an incredibly big fan of school choice and that all kids don't learn in the same way. The 2 bricks and mortar in my community, Snowy Range and Montessori, do a wonderful job. And I know of Potter here. They do great jobs. I'm also convinced that we need to update our statutes, take a good look at them. So that being said, my amendment is that we delete basically the engrossed version and that we include in Representative Summers' 2002 amendment, section 5, and that become the bill. It has so it turns this bill into a study bill. It obligates us to do that hard work of looking at our charter statutes and flush them out, understand them.
Don't believe you moved.
I'd like to move this amendment.
Okay, been moved. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Obermuller.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could continue, just when I read the bill, I have 30 questions on 2 pages. There's a whole section on, and in fact, thank you, Dr. Boyd, for bringing it up about what a virtual charter school would look like. I think that deserves a tremendous amount of discussion, a tremendous amount of thought. We've learned a lot in the past year, but I'm not comfortable with the 2 pages that I'm seeing in here right now. I'm not comfortable with the 2 pages that I see afterwards in terms of what it means to bring a company in. So we're not talking about that parent group or that teacher group that we've all been thinking about, but what it means to bring a company in. I want to talk about those things. I do. And so my amendment again is that this bill become a study bill and we can use the language of Representative Summers on section 5.
Okay. Further discussion?
Chairman.
Go ahead, Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm going to say on and against. However, I do think that the section 5 is probably one of the most important pieces of this amendment. I think this discussion is an important discussion for our entire House members to hear. I think we're doing our due diligence in here, and I think the 2 amendments that Majority Floor Leader has brought really help clean up this bill a lot, in my opinion. However, I also think this is a much larger discussion, and who knows, maybe this bill, passes with flying colors out there on the floor. It goes over to the Senate and they just don't concur and we end up with nothing in the end. That's okay. I still think that we need to have this, and I think Management Council will assign this as a good topic, considering the nature of what we've had over the past couple of months here. So on and against, but definitely for this bill.
Further discussion on the amendment, Representative Nyman.
I would just have to completely agree with Representative Brown. I believe this needs to make it to the floor, needs to have full discussion. I think you can mine a lot of wealth from 60 mines out there on that floor, and if we have the opportunity and Nick can go to an interim topic, I'm sure that's probably where it's headed, but I think it would be a valuable thing to hear what folks have to say and get the interaction on the floor. So I would be against this and for moving this bill to the floor.
Okay. Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the minority leader is right on. I don't think anybody sitting here knows enough about charter school law. The last time we looked at it in the legislature was probably 10 years ago. We took a little bit of a deep dive into it. I don't think anybody, I know I don't. We all need to learn more about it. And I agree the amendments have improved the bill. I think it'd be good for us to take a deep dive in this and really find out. I think to pass a bill and, hey, let's see what happens. We'll study it later. I think this virtual charter school thing, and let's understand what we're doing here. I mean, this is for profit companies. This isn't 5 people getting together and I want a little better deal for my own kids. These are for profit companies going to come into our state and take our precious school dollars. And those corporations, that money's going out of state. We see what homegrown charters do. We've got them already in our state. It's a great process. And and it's successful. And we can compare those scores of these charters against everybody else. But I think we're in a new era. And before we start farming out school facilities dollars, Fortune 500 companies, I want to learn more. And so I'm going to support the amendment.
Anyone else? Yes, Representative Overby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also am going to support the amendment. My own knowledge base needs an interim study on it. And if my knowledge base isn't really ready for this topic, how do you think the discussion on the floor is going to go? It takes work to get a committee bill and to vet it in such a way that a committee will send it out under their name. This bill needs to come out as a committee bill. So on and for. Thank you.
Okay, other discussion from the committee? Okay, one more.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think one of the things that's important to mention on here is I go back and I look at 2002 as the amendment from Representative Summers. We don't make this effective until next year anyways, at least sections 1 through 3, which is a majority of the bill. And so I think that's really important for this committee to recognize that just if we do pass this, if it makes it all the way through the process and the governor does sign this, nothing effectually becomes effective until this committee does that work anyways. And I have a very, very strong suspicion that this particular language that we would be putting in the green books would probably be the nexus of what we're going to be studying through our interim process. So I don't foresee this being a cataclysmic issue as we move forward. I think what we're looking at is an opportunity to move in the right direction. And I think that this particular bill starts us in that direction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Representative Harshman.
I think, Mr. Chairman, and with all due respect, I urge caution, on a delayed effective date. That assumes you can come back in and correct any mistakes. And this is a torturous process. Bicameralism is tough. And man, I don't want to pass something and then find out it's not quite what we want, but we can't really fix it because we can't get through 2 committees and 2 houses. And I want to make sure, since it's not going to happen for another year or 2, let's study it and make sure it's right and get it right. So I don't want to get it wrong and then can't change it. And that's a very real possibility. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, sensing you're ready to vote. Question on the amendment. All in favor of Representative Conley's amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no? No. I think we probably better have a show of hands on that. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the Representative Harsh.
Mr. Chairman, on members on page 11, I have an amendment. It goes over to 11 and 12. It's pretty simple. Really, on page 11, I want to delete the new language on lines 2 and 3 and reinstate all the stricken language down through line 22, then delete 22 and 23 and flip over, Mr. Chairman and members, and delete on page 12 all the way through line 4 at the end of charter. So the only thing I want out of new language is really this: nothing in this subsection shall be deemed to exempt the charter school from. And then I think this Romanet 1, 2, and 3 ought to stay. The new language on page 12.
So I'll second.
Okay. So basically, the Professional Teaching Standards Board is that what you're doing with that? Is
Right.
that,
Mr. Chairman, yes, and I think just this whole part of regulations and summaries and how you report, I think it's all good language. And then I think that combined with the new Romanets 1, 2, and 3, I think works better on page 12.
Okay. We had a motion and you seconded, didn't you? Representative Summers was the second. Discussion on the amendment. Sensing you're ready to vote. Call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay, the amendment is carried. Back on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, it's on page 36. I have a proposed amendment. And I emailed this to you, members. Page 36, line 17, where it says "and H." And H on the last page, page 36. So on line 17, where it says "and H." So you'd basically pull this repealer out. And what this repealer is that employees of these schools are going to be certified or PTSB certified teachers. And, you know, and PTSB has ways to get professionals in that don't have a teaching degree. We already have that, but I think, okay, whatever our most precious resource is, let's argue it's children. I want to make sure that everybody's been vetted, they've gone through the process, and that's who we have in front of our kids. So that's the amendment. That deletes H.
You did move the amendment, right?
I moved it, yes.
Do I
Mr.
hear a
Chairman.
second? Seconded by Senator Connor. Okay.
Discussion.
And the reason, Mr. Chairman, the reason that I am supporting this amendment is I know that charter schools often want non-certified teachers and for different reasons. And those are acceptable if they go through the PTSB and that they get that exception. And so to me, it makes sense that what we have in place right now, which is PTSB or an exception, works. And so that's why I'm in favor of getting rid of H.
Further comments? Yes, go ahead.
Just to be clear, members, so PTSB allows non-certified folks to be teachers. You got to go through background checks. Most have a degree and they'll give you a 3-5-year exemption. Professionals in the classroom programs, what it's called. We allow non-educators to be superintendents of our schools. So all those things are out there, but I think just to say, hire whoever you want. Yeah, I think that's a tough sell. So I
Okay.
appreciate your support.
Question's been called on the bill or on the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay, the amendment is carried. Back on the bill. All right, question on the bill. Roll call, please.
Representative Andrew,
Aye.
Representative Brown, Representative Connolly, Representative Harshman, Representative Nyman, Representative Newsom, Representative Obermuller, Representative Summers, Chairman Paxton.
Aye.
5 ayes, 4 noes.
Okay, the motion is carried. We're on to Bill 127 finally. Senator Kinski, I believe you're more than ready to present your bill to us.
Sure.
We've got a half hour.
Aye.
We still have 30 minutes, but yeah, we want to.
Just don't take long.
My voice down. Gonna deafen myself in this little, feel like a video game show host, an isolation box. The Wyoming Learn While You Earn program, I feel inadequate to present it, given that, I've got Representative Harshman here and Representative Summers and Representative Greer. It's is sort of the thank you. Sort of the father of this bill. He's very excited about this kind of education, and the more he talked about it, the more excited I got. So I assisted him in getting this bill drafted and getting it put together and kind of vetting it through LSO staff and discussing it with some stakeholders. And I'm proud to have members of this committee signed on as co-sponsors. So the idea for Learn While You Earn is to try and implement a program in Wyoming that many other states have done and other countries around the world have done much more successfully than the United States. It's styled as an internship program. I prefer to think of it as more as sort of an apprenticeship program, where young people who realize very early on in their high school careers that they'd like to pursue a career in technical education, whether that's welding or diesel mechanics or machine tools, and all of which are jobs that are employers across the nation are crying for these kind of employees. And so the idea here is if you've got a young person and there's a local employer and that person can get a job with that employer, and while they're working, the employer is paying them. The employer then coordinates with their high school and their community college to see that there's a program of sufficient academic rigor that between the college or between the high school and the community college, if that's where they also choose to get credit, that they're not just being paid and getting credit for working, but that they're learning on the job, that there's a sufficient rigor and reinforcement from the academic institution that they can come out potentially of high school with either a non-credit credential that'll put them to work at a decent salary, or that they can be earning high school credit and hopefully community college credit as well. So the other great advantage of it, and there's people here who are much more familiar with these kind of programs than I, the other great advantage is it really leverages what the employers have in terms of their equipment and their skills by buddying them up with people who really know how to teach, that is the high school teachers and the community colleges. So there's equipment available in shops across the state that the high school is just not necessarily going to be able to match. So it really helps extend the reach there. So with that, if I could, let me give you a brief walkthrough on the bill. Pages 2 to 3 establish the definitions, and I'll highlight the parts that have really received attention up to this stage. At the top of page 3, lines 1 through 3, there's what a credential means. And originally, Representative Greer and I had this very narrowly defined to something like instrumentation and CNC machines, because we were afraid people would see that, there's this great big new program coming. And so we really wanted to scale it down because the funding is going to permit us essentially to do kind of a pilot and a proof of concept, and one that hopefully would catch on. And but the way it came out amended, it's much more broadly to working in a skilled trade, and I regarded that as a friendly amendment. On page 3, we actually create the program, and A says that the idea is that the student can earn wages while participating, and that we're hoping that this will really be employer driven, that employers who really need the help. And that's sort of the evolution of it. As Representative Greer will tell you, it's tough to get trained machinists to move to Worland. So it's a grow your own kind of program. So you take young high school students that are really on fire, you employ them, you pay them a wage, and you coordinate their training with the high school and with a community college. And it doesn't necessarily have to be his local community college. It can be any community college that wants to get involved with this, or a consortium of community colleges.
Quick question.
Yes, please.
I'm kind of curious on this. I've done a little bit of research, and I spoke with Representative Greer this morning on this. And the one that sticks out to me is where you said that we make this program. Page 3, it says a community college district may establish a learn while you earn program. My question on this is, what prohibits them from establishing this type of program already?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, there's nothing that prohibits them from doing it. It's not as formalized as this. This helps coordinate it with both the concurrent and dual enrollment. It helps provide some reimbursement to the employer for the when their employee is not engaged in earning a profit for the company and is at the high school working on understanding how to help educate the student, provide some reimbursement for that. Although I suspect most employers would be happy to donate that time. I know when I had a home care program, I just donated my respiratory therapist time for it. So there's nothing that actually prohibits it per se. There isn't a companion bill that Representative Greer is running, which deals with the OSHA and the workers' comp issues of having somebody who's under the age of 18 in a machine shop. So this takes what has been done episodically here and there to a much more formal level and to a much steps the program up. So then on page 4, the program has to provide students with employer-paid career technical education. On page 5, we start getting through some of the requirements that there has to be on lines 4 to 8. There has to be an agreement between an employer and a community college. And if it's a high school student, the high school has to agree. The student has to be eligible for lawful employment. And then 13 and 15 is important, require active participation by the employer to ensure necessary rigor for a college academic credit or credential program. In other words, they're not just going to work and hopefully they're going to learn something that's valuable. There really has to be academic merit in what we're doing. Continuing over to page 6, on line 4 through 8, the student has to agree to allow verification of the training paid and the wages paid by the employer. The rest of it then on page 7, one that received a lot of discussion is lines 5 to 8. Originally, this said 4 semesters, and then it was pointed out to us that there may be motivated sophomores that would really like to be involved. So that was amended to say 6 semesters. So that would really make it almost a European style apprenticeship program if you've got students that are on fire and really want to get started there. Then pages 7, and I think it runs through 9 is just stating some technical things to help with the entering into the agreements and dual and concurrent enrollment, the sort of nomenclature that we've got to have. Then page 10 outlines the conditions under which the college can be paid. And it's a typical kind of boilerplate that says they have to be participating in the program. 12 creates an account and appropriates the funds. 14, importantly, in 505 says this is not an entitlement to continued funding by the legislature. Continuation of any funding is subject to legislative appropriation. 506 on line 20 sunsets the program in 2026, giving us a chance to see if it's really performing. Hopefully we'll know well before then. And then at the bottom of 15-309, how the districts are to be calculated for their foundation program for their ADM. And I believe then 18 is just how the funds are distributed through the commission. So that is a very high level walkthrough on the bill, but Sandy Caldwell actually has a much more detailed one that she's provided to the sponsors. And if the folks are interested, we can get a copy of that forwarded to the entire committee. And I know there's a number of people who are much more facile in understanding the concepts than I am. I'm just excited about it because I see the employer demand. And I can see kids that are really on fire that would like to do this. And in Sheridan, you know, we've got 400 light manufacturing jobs that didn't exist 18 years ago. Decker closed, East Decker closed, 90 folks lost their jobs and the community's still humming along. I mean, this is the future for the state of Wyoming, is this light manufacturing. Why not Wyoming? We can be in this game, and we've already got a lot of employers that are doing this. In fact, I lost a company with 40 jobs to Casper when I first became mayor, and it was extruded plastics. And after I lost it, I called the fellow and I said, I'm not asking you to reconsider. I just want to know why we lost out to Casper and what I can do the next time. And he said, well, you don't have a critical mass of people that do what we do. And I said, well, Casper doesn't have companies that do extruded plastics. And he said, no, but Casper has companies where somebody sits at a computer and they can design something. Then they go to a small screen that drives a very expensive machine, and they punch buttons on that and stuff comes out. Doesn't matter what's metal or plastic or wood. If that skill set exists in a community, any company that uses which I found out is CNC. And see, these CNC skills are just in demand, and it's so well suited to these young people that have grown up with devices and computers and programming. This is just a good fit for Wyoming, making things for America. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Okay, Representative Summers, I believe, has a question.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And so, I like obviously I'm on the bill, so I like the idea. The one concern, obviously, you and I both served on appropriations together, right? And so on page 18, may request funding. My only question to you, and I had it at the time, but it was kind of late getting out, so I signed on, is why didn't you put some kind of limit? In other words, limit the amount that they can request or limit the number of programs, or is there a limit in the bill and I've just missed it? And
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, the limit is the $1 million, which, and when it's gone, it's gone. And they can come back in and ask for more, but this may be more background than you wanted. But Representative Greer and I really struggled on the funding. And originally we were looking at maybe a device where a BOCES for CTE would help drive this. And then there's as you know, there's the special select committee on community college funding. We thought, the community college funding bill will be rolling through the legislature. We decided not to put anything in here except to ask for an appropriation to get this started, trusting that sometime in this session, well, it's not going to happen this session, but maybe in the next session, that we'll decide what we're going to do with community college funding, because it became sticky. For instance, you take his county, they don't have a community. Well, we've talked about this on appropriations. Some counties don't have a community college. Some have a service district that's funded by a penny or a BOCES. And then there's counties that have a community college district, and we're trying to figure out what's equitable on the funding. And originally it was a much longer bill where we're creating a new kind of BOCES. And then Chairman Greer decided, discretion being the better part of valor, that we should let's go for a small appropriation and walk before we can run. So I don't know quite how to settle that. I personally believe it's going to end up being a local decision for the local community college district and the schools as to how to fund it, if we gave them the ability to do so.
Go ahead, Representative Harshman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things, Senator Kinski on page 11, and appreciate the bill. I signed on as well. I think there's a whole group of young people, whether it's medical or it's machine shops or whatever. Okay, just on this one, on lines 9 and 10, about, what the monies can be used for. Obviously, staff, resource materials, support for the program, but this reimbursement piece to employers, how do you see that? I mean, is this going to be by rules or agreements, obviously? But I mean, yeah, I guess just your comments kind of on that, how you see this $1 million going out.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, it's a good question. The way I can see, well, first, I think it's going to have to be by rule, and then the agreements are going to have to be individually negotiated so that it's mutually acceptable to the employer as well as to the school district and the community college. The only part that we intend for employers to be able to receive is if you've got a shop foreman that's really good, but he's not a teacher. And so we're going to buddy that person up with somebody who really is a teacher. And so that shop foreman may have a substantial time where they're really not engaged in the employment for the employer, but they're trying to come up to speed on this program, and maybe they're meeting with you about, here's where I am with the student, and there may be, and similarly, there may be observation time from the teacher in the shop floor where that teacher they're not teaching class in the district at that time. So, how do we compensate for that? So, but my expectation is I think the employers that really need and want this are probably just going to donate that time. I would really expect that, and that would be an incentive for the district and the community college as well. Yeah.
Well, one more question, Mr. Chairman, and it's on page 18, just section 3, and it's a little thing, but it's general fund. And I would like to, but I don't want to mess with your bill, but I'd like to just amend that to LSRA and really, I want to say this the right way, because as we gather more state funds, I think that'd be a place where we could maybe backfill that but I don't want to, tinker with the thing. So I do have a little idea in mind why to do that.
Well, Mr. Chair and Representative Harshman, I welcome all the help I can get.
Well,
In the ideal world, we just print money like they
Yeah.
do in Washington, and then the sky'd be the limit.
I think it's even electronic transfer now. You
Yeah,
can print
that's
it.
right.
But no, I don't want to, it's just a little thing. but I just-
I'd regard that as a friendly amendment, Mr. Chairman, and I'd welcome the help.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
If I get the right button pushed here, Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on pages 7 and 8 under little letter G and how these students are counted. So as I read through this, it says that the school district will count them as ADM and the community, if they're in the community college, they'll count them as full-time equivalents. And I'm wondering if we're counting students twice, once in the school district and once in the community college, or if I'm missing something, if those are somehow separated.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Newsom, I'm going to defer to Sandy Caldwell of the Community College Commission. This language is well-established language for concurrent and dual enrollment, as I understand it. I think that's accurate. I don't think there's double counting or double dipping going on, but she can explain it far better than I. It's always best to come to a posse to these kind of things.
It looks to me like we have a number of people out here that would like to testify on this bill, and I don't see how we can do it in the time available, and we're probably going to have to carry it over. So I would like to exercise a little chairman prerogative. We have a young lady here that has been sitting patiently out here waiting, and I'd like to have her testify because I know she will be able to be here on Wednesday when we finish up the bill. And so with your
I'm gladly defer to your superior judgment.
Okay, well,
Mr.
thank you
Chairman.
very much. And I know I'm exercising my right and my prejudice toward the FFA program. And so if you'd come forward next and introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, not as if the coat didn't tell us, but go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, my name is Cameron McGee, and I am currently serving as the 2020-2021 Wyoming FFA State President. I currently reside in Glen Rock, where I have been raised on our family's hay farm, and I run my own flock of commercial ewes and registered Southdowns. And I am here to ask for your support on Senate File 127, Wyoming Learn While You Earn. Work-based learning is extremely important for all FFA members. Each member must have an SAE, which can consist of 4 different types of an SAE or a supervised agricultural learning experience. So these can be anything from an internship to a placement or a research project or even entrepreneurship. So each of these not only meet academic standards, but they also help each person work within the industry. The Agriculture Experience Tracker, which each member must use, also says that in 2016, we had a statewide economic impact of $8 million, which is quite impressive for Wyoming agriculturalists in high school. I ask that you each accept my proposal and that we look to accepting this bill because work-based learning is extremely important, not only for myself, but multiple students within the state of Wyoming. So thank you for your consideration, and I will happily answer any questions.
Hey, questions for Madam President? Yes, Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam President. Thank you for being here and thank you for your testimony. I'm just curious, what are your plans for when you finish high school?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Connolly, I am actually a freshman at Casper College, and I am pursuing an animal science degree. And after Casper, I plan to go to Texas A&M to pursue a veterinary degree to become a vet.
Representative Barlow's replacement. Any other questions? For the young lady? All right.
Chairman, if I may just say, we sent it, I hate it, but our former state vet is now at Texas A&M, I believe, Dr. Cook. And so then you come back home.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you for being here.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, folks, we have about 6 or 7 minutes left, and I don't know whether we have anyone out there that can testify in less than 6 or 7 minutes. If we do, we could take them now, but yes, go ahead. Dr. Caldwell, you're going to have to be really fast.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I am Sandy Caldwell, Executive Director of the Wyoming Community College Commission. I will be very brief for you, and that will make sure whenever you do bring this back up, you can really focus on others who really want to provide some testimony. I am here on behalf of the Community College Commission and the Educational Attainment Executive Council, which there are members here. And I've actually been here talking about 2 other bills before, and this is the 3rd bill that is listed on that chart that I gave you on the document. And actually, I see a couple of other members of the Attainment Council are here present as well. I just want to hit a couple of things related to this one. I can answer a few of the questions that you brought up so that I can maybe clear very quickly on how to manage those. One of the things about this particular bill, and one of the things that is so aligned with the Attainment Council, is the work-based learning part of it. And a question I believe you, Representative Brown, asked, how is this different? It's different in that it really puts business and industry in the center and allows that agreement to really work, not just between the college and the K-12 district, but to really put the business and industry in the center of that relationship is a very important component of that. Another question that was asked was about the ADMs and the FTE, and that is actually in a prior statute that I believe is 2120. Oh my goodness, it's in the notes that I provided. So I can get that one for you, sections A through the 8. That is existing statute. The real difference in this was that it did allow for the provisions of some of the non-credit, which is a new direction. That's very important when you talk about industry recognized credentials. So the balance of that is reflected in already existing language, as you had heard. And so with that, I am happy to answer any questions for you. I don't want to take up any additional time. I think you know that this is quite reflective of the Attainment Council work, and it is in the state strategic plan, and it is in the Community College Commission brand new adopted statewide college system strategic plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and that was pretty brief for me.
It was very much appreciated. Anyone have any questions on the committee? Have any questions for Dr. Caldwell? Well, it looks like you're off the hook. So
thank you.
And given the time that we have left, I think it's appropriate that we adjourn the meeting and reconvene on Wednesday to finish up the bill. One thing about this committee, when we have a bill, we vet that thoroughly. You know, they can't say we don't. So thank you for your time. Bye.